Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Disney and Pixar film Inside Out 2. This is a sequel to the 2015 hit that came out, years ago. Pete Docter did not return this time around. Another Pixar employee named Kelsey Mann took on directing duties this time around. But Pete Docter, I think, still was involved as a producer and I'm sure as a creative consultant and a bunch of other stuff. But he didn't direct it this installment this time. But in Inside Out 2, though, you guys, we do find Riley again, the character from the first film, the human character. She is a teenager now. She's no longer a child like in the first film. She's probably pretty comfortable with this place that they moved into since the first film. She's established some friends. She's, knows people in the school that she goes to now and things like that. But she goes to this hockey camp because she wants to make the varsity team for hockey because she still has a passion for that since the first film. And so while she's there, there's other varsity people that have made the team since since she's been there, and she really wants to impress them while also kind of still keeping close to the friends that she had in school. She gets some updates from them that she's not happy about. But over the course of this film, we find out what exactly happens to Riley over the course of hockey camp. Does she make the varsity team? Does she really become friends with these people that she's just trying to, fake bond with and get closer with? Does she maintain the friends that she had before hockey camp began? So all these things happen over the course of Inside Out 2. There's also new emotions that try to take over the motherboard that the original emotions from the first film were in control of. We have anxiety, envy, embarrassment. There's a character that's supposed to represent boredom. I forget the name that they called it, but it was supposed to represent boredom. So a bunch of new emotions trying to take over the motherboard. So joy and the other emotions get kicked out of it, and they have to work their way back up to the motherboard. So that way, hockey camp for Riley goes way better than how they were going to approach it. Because if they approach it, obviously things are going to go wrong with anxiety being kind of the lead emotion at this point. She's voiced by Hawke from Stranger Things, from those who might recognize her from that. But this is a really good movie, though, you guys. This is like I said, like a follow-up to Inside Out, the first film, and I really had a great time with this movie. I will say right off the bat, though, it's not as good as the first film, but there's things about this film that I really enjoyed. So let's go over some positives and negatives of things that I liked about Inside Out 2 that I think is absolutely the reasons why you have to go out and see it. But there's also some things about it, too, I think that also could have been better for it as well. So for my positives and negatives of this movie, first and foremost, this film does continue all the great stuff you love from that first film. There's even some ideas here that I think are very strong that are almost on par with the first film. Like they represent what Riley's brain looks like when she's brainstorming ideas. There's another part where they're showing, I think, suppressed memories and like kind of things that are in the way back of her mind that she's trying to forget about that are still existent in her brain. There's a character that's kind of representative of something from Blue's Clues. There's a character that represents a character from Final Fantasy VII, and so there's a bunch of stuff here that is really quite fun to discover in this movie, and really some great ideas that are on display. Similar to the first film, it's very original. There's a lot of things that they come up with that are just really creative for how to display what goes on in somebody's mind in a situation like this. So all the stuff you love from the first film is continued, and I think that's definitely the greatest strength of this movie. It's all the stuff you love continued. Another positive of this movie is I like the character of Anxiety. I really like how she is trying to be like Joy. She views Joy as an idol. She views Joy as this role model of her whole life. And now that her and these new emotions, basically the opportunity to basically be Joy and the other emotions, I like how this character really has the ambition to think that she could be as good, if not better, than Joy, and to pursue this hockey camp for Riley even better than Joy can possibly do it. So there's things about the character that I think are really strong. She's not just evil to be evil. The film does explore kind of the good and the bad of having anxiety and things like that. So I really liked how the character really added something to the story and really brought something new to the sequel to Inside Out. I also like all the new nods to pop culture. There's even characters, like I mentioned before, that are like, there's a character that's representative of something from Blue's Clues. There's a character that's something that you would see in something like Super Smash Brothers. Even the game that this character was once featured in was very much in the spirit of Super Smash Brothers. So they do stuff like that that's really clever. And they also just, they have the Triple Dent Gum commercial back and things like that. So all the new nods they have from pop culture and things that they do to make the film fun and make you represent, make you remember, video game characters and TV shows and movies and stuff, I think are all really represented here in a great way. And like I said, I like all the new nods to pop culture throughout the film. It's really a lot of fun. I also like too how certain emotions get along with other emotions, specifically some of the newer ones. Fear gets along with anxiety. He kind of views anxiety as a role model throughout the film, and it's really quite funny. And there's also sadness and embarrassment get along really well. So there's a whole thing with them too throughout the film. So there's just I like how the film finds ways to not only bring the emotions back, but how would they react to these new emotions coming on board? And it's not all about like, oh well, they're taking over my job. Like some of them really kind of view these new emotions as role models as well. So I thought that was a very kind of clever way to kind of work all these emotions into one film, and not just make the old emotions versus the new ones that make them the good guys and the bad guys. I like how there's more dimension to them. How some of them view other ones as role models, while some of them as just annoying. So I thought that aspect of the story was very fun too. I also thought the use of Imagination Land, similar to how it was used in the first film, they bring it back in this film, and it's definitely a lot of fun, just like in the first film. They definitely do a lot of things here. Probably the one part of it that they really kind of got down really well was there's like a place that represents like an animation department like under high stress. So I thought that was really clever how Pixar kind of put that in there. So I almost kind of wonder if that's representative of like their tougher years at Pixar and stuff like that. So I like how they kind of worked that in, how they all kind of pitch in ideas for anxiety to use for Riley. So I thought that was kind of a really fun way to incorporate the Imagination Land for Inside Out too. I thought that was a really clever way they did that. But for my negatives of this film, I first and foremost think it's not as good as the first. I thought the first film was just so original and so novel for its time, and they really did kind of something new and different. And though it is a sequel, though it is the second time around, I really do feel like for a sequel like this to really have an extra punch, you really kind of have to bring your A game and really do something different and big with it. So I thought that aspect of the film was a little disappointing. It was just a great continuation of the first film while not really adding anything additional, new, or special to the mix. So I thought that aspect of the story could have been better. Another big negative with this film, too, is I thought that they could have used just more locations than just Riley at hockey camp, because they really do spend a lot of time there in this movie. They do kind of explore a little bit what was going on before she went to hockey camp, like her getting braces and her turning 13 and other things like that. How home life is going for a little bit. Her mom and her dad really do not have a big role in this film at all. But I really would have liked to have seen more things going on outside of hockey camp, I think, because what made the first film so special is we see her moving to a different town, and that kind of allows you to do things like you get to show her home life, you get to show, restaurants that she's not going to like or things that she is going to like. You're going to be able to show, how she's making friends and her school life, and I feel like there's more you could do with a story about a young girl moving than you can with putting a teenager in hockey camp. I feel like there's more you could do with that first film's plot than you can with the second film's plot. So I would have liked to see more locations explored. How Riley's kind of doing it in her teenage life. Does she have a crush on somebody? How is she converting over to being a teenager and things like that? So I thought that aspect of the story could have been explored a little bit more rather than just placing Riley at hockey camp. I also thought the original of the first film felt a little sharper. And once again, I think that does go back to the fact that Pete Docter did not direct this film. I think his sense of originality and his ideas were a little stronger for that first film. I also kind of like, too, that he really did kind of keep it to a certain amount of emotions. Now that we have a bunch more of emotions in the mix now, I feel like that's harder to balance in a story. So I think that was something that might have worked against this film, is maybe they did have almost too many new emotions into the mix. But however they did the first film, however they, maybe it was just fresh for its time, and maybe that novelty, so many years later has kind of worn off a little bit. But for some reason, I do feel like the originality of the first film did feel sharper the first time around. And like I mentioned before, I really do think more aspects of Riley's life could have been explored. There's just so many things outside of the whole hockey camp thing, I really would have liked to have seen them explore some more. Um, and they really didn't do that. They really just kind of spent most of the film in the hockey camp, and I would have liked to have seen other aspects of her life explored throughout the film. And also, too, maybe it was just the audience I was with, and maybe it was just, me kind of focusing in on the movie, but I did feel the humor this time around didn't feel as impactful as the first film, because when the first film has a joke, man, the whole room was roaring, the whole room would be, screaming in laughter. This time around, I just didn't feel like it had that. It didn't, there's some funny moments, there's some amusing things throughout it, but for the most part, I just felt like the humor wasn't as impactful this time around. So I thought that aspect of the story was a little disappointing as well. But overall, I'm going to give Inside Out 2 an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's very enjoyable. I think it's a great Pixar film. There's things about it that are really enjoyable and really lovable. But like I said, there is some negatives along the way that keep it from being, absolutely fantastic or not quite as good as the first film. But I do feel like it's a great film. I do feel like it's a film I could recommend that you go see in theaters. I am glad that it is doing really well in the box office. It really does deserve it, especially this time where not a lot of films are getting a lot of money in the box office. But I highly recommend seeing it. Be sure to see Inside Out 2. Highly recommend it. Just go in knowing that it's not quite as good as the first film, and I think you'll have a good time.